Okay, let's dive right in. Japan's official drone safety manual is, well, it's a dense document. And while every pilot should read it, not everyone has the time. So, we're going to break it down into the absolute essentials. Whether you've been flying for years or you're just getting started, this is what you need to know to fly safely and legally in Japan. You know, the manual opens with this incredible vision, calling drones the sky's industrial revolution. It paints a picture of automated deliveries, of drones helping in disasters. I mean, amazing stuff. But, and this is a huge but, for every one of those possibilities, there's the risk of a serious accident. A single mistake can have huge consequences. That's why these rules aren't just suggestions. They're the absolute foundation of being a responsible pilot. So here's our flight plan for today. First, we're going to talk about a pilot's core responsibility. It's all about your mindset. Then we'll get into the 3 different flight categories. After that, we'll cover the big one, the no-fly zones. Then the specific rules for how you fly. And we'll wrap it all up with your drone's digital ID. Simple as that. Let's get to it. All right, first up, let's talk about the most important piece of safety gear you have. And nope, it's not on your drone, it's actually in your head. The manual is super clear about this. Your mindset, your sense of responsibility as a pilot, comes before you ever even think about touching the controls. It really boils down to 3 core ideas, kind of like a pilot's creed. The first is jikaku, or awareness. This just means you and only you are responsible for the flight. Second is junbi, or preparation. Seriously, the manual points out that just skipping pre-flight checks causes a ton of accidents. Don't be that person. And third, and this one's my favorite, is muri o shinai, which basically means don't push it. Knowing when to call off a flight because of bad weather or any other issue, that's the mark of a pro pilot, not a scared one. And this quote right here, straight from the manual, isn't just a friendly reminder. It is a legal fact. When it says you're responsible for everything, it means everything. If something goes wrong, we're talking potential criminal charges, civil lawsuits for damages, government penalties, all of it lands right on your shoulders. So with that heavy responsibility in mind, it makes sense that not all flights are created equal, right? A flight in the middle of nowhere is way different than one over a city. That's why Japan's aviation law sorts every single flight into one of 3 categories. You absolutely have to know which category your flight falls into because that determines the rules you have to follow. So here's the breakdown. Category 1 flights are your low-risk, easy-day flights. Think flying in a wide-open field, nobody around. You don't need any special permission for that. Category 2 is when the risk goes up. Maybe you're in regulated airspace or using a tricky flight method. But, and this is the key, you've secured the ground so nobody can walk underneath your drone. This requires permits. Then you have Category 3. This is the big one. This is flying over people, cars, buildings, places you can't secure. This requires the highest level of certification for both you and your drone. So what's the magic ingredient that separates a Category 2 from a much more complex Category 3 flight? It's this concept right here. Tachi-iri kare sochi, or entry management measures. Basically, it's all about what you do to keep people safe on the ground. If you can guarantee no one's going to wander under your drone, maybe you have assistance or you put up signs and cones, you can keep that flight in Category 2. If you can't guarantee that, well, welcome to Category 3. Okay, now that we've got the risk levels sorted, let's get into the hard and fast rules. We'll start with where you can fly, or more importantly, where you absolutely can't fly without getting permission from the government first. It's a pretty straightforward question, right? But the answer is something every single pilot needs to have memorized. So let's lay it out. Where exactly in Japan is flying a drone strictly controlled? It breaks down into 4 main areas. First, no surprise here, around airports. We need to keep planes and helicopters safe. Second, emergency use airspace. If there's a disaster or a police operation, they'll designate an area and you have to stay out. Third, any flight that's 150 meters or higher. And finally, and this is a big one for city flyers, over densely inhabited districts, or DIDs. These are based on the census, and you can and should check the official government maps online to see if your area is a DID. Okay, so we've covered where you can't fly. Now let's talk about how you can't fly, at least not without getting special approval. These rules are all about specific actions that increase the risk while you're in the air. But before we get to the list, let's lock in on one number: 30 meters. Think of this as your personal safety bubble. You have to keep your drone at least 30 meters away from any person, building, or car that isn't directly involved with your flight. The second you pop that 30-meter bubble, you've just bumped your flight into a higher risk category, and you're going to need a permit. So besides that 30-meter rule, there are a bunch of other things you just can't do without permission.
You can't fly at night. You have to keep the drone in your sight at all times, and the manual is very clear. FPV goggles don't count as visual line of sight. You also can't fly over big crowds at festivals or concerts. You can't transport dangerous goods, and you definitely can't drop anything from your drone. Each of these things just adds way too much risk to the public.
All right, last section. Let's talk about the drone itself, because it's not just about how and where you fly. Your aircraft has to be legal, too. For pretty much any drone weighing 100 grams or more, this means it has to be registered with the government and be able to identify itself while it's in the air.
And how does it identify itself? Through a system called remote ID. The best way to think about it is like a digital license plate for your drone. It's a little device or a built-in feature that's constantly broadcasting your drone's registration number. This lets the authorities look up and see who's flying, which is obviously a huge part of keeping the skies safe for everyone.
And here's a super practical tip, straight from the manual. When you're buying a drone or any radio equipment in Japan, look for this little symbol. This is the Giteki mark. It's your guarantee that the gear complies with Japan's radio law. Flying with uncertified equipment is illegal, so always check for this mark.
So there you have it, from the pilot's creed all the way to that digital license plate. These are the absolute fundamentals of flying a drone in Japan. Yeah, the rules are strict, but they're what makes that whole skies industrial revolution possible in a way that's safe for all of us. The manual says it best. The operator is responsible for everything. The future of the sky is literally in your hands. The only real question left is, are you ready?